So before we start assembling our little violets, I thought I'd show you several vintage flowers and some that I have made and different ways that you can assemble these. So this is just four little flowers and two big leaves, and not single wire construction at all, but they are they've just put these thick things together and twisted them up and done some messy flossing and maybe used a ribbon and some floral tape. Here's one that I made probably 15 years ago, very similar to that, inspired by that last flower. So I've got four flowers and three leaves, and instead of using any floral tape or what am I trying to say? Or flossed. I essentially flossed it with just green wire, and I used a piece of heavy gauge to like bind my flowers and leaves to. So this is probably a piece like this that of 18 gauge wire as my central. And then I bent it to fit in the vase I wanted, and I didn't know if it would always be in there, so I didn't cut it. I just left it. So there's one option. So this one uses no heavy piece like this. It's just the stems bound together. This one uses a heavy gauge in there, and I use just green wire instead of floss or floral tape. Because I'm so interested in vintage French bleeded flowers, I have a sort of a hatred of floral tape because it disintegrates, and if you're relying on it for assembly, eventually your flowers are going to fall apart. These cute little flowers, I managed to buy a whole bunch of these, and this is just one little bundle. So one little bundle, and I probably have 10 of these all combined in a little vase. And so you can see they did the leaves pretty much the way we're doing, just a little leaf, and then the stem. Try to see, you can just see it's two wires, and like that one's not twisted, but this one is twisted. So you can see you can put these together, and it really, once you look at the bundle as a whole, it just doesn't really matter, right? But so again, this one, you can see this really heavy wire, and they're putting theirs in, and the heavy wire runs all the way up to here. That 18 gauge wire runs between my pinky and my pointer fingers. And so they have put these, sort of on the stem, and this would be a good option. And these are just, I love these little flowers and these super cute little beads. Here's another bundle. Most of these are done that same way. These are neat. The only thing here that's a single wire is, the leaves are single wire. And again, a heavy gauge central wire, and then the nice, neat flossing. I have never flossed any flowers, so this is that same kind with irises. And again, a heavy gauge. Actually, this one does not have a heavy gauge. These are all just the little wires, and the floss is fraying at the end. But what a nice, neat job they did with the floss. And I love these little irises. If you are interested in French beaded vintage flowers, you will eventually see these quite a bit. I don't know. It must have been a popular pattern or a giveaway or something. But these are sort of interesting. They're fun. They look great. This is, you could make this in minutes. And there's no beads on the stem. It's just twisted wire. And these wires are just twisted and then wrapped with a little bit of floral tape that is starting to disintegrate. So I might take a real fine wire and wrap that just to help it stay together the way it was originally made. I would say this one is newer than the other ones I have been showing you. Here's another one with some daisies. And I wanted to show you these leaves. These leaves could be made with a single wire, and they have that wrap, if you can see that very well, like we were doing on the very top portion of the leaf. And again, this has that heavy a heavy gauge wire in there. It's the flowers, and the top part of the stem are flossed, and then it's floral tape down below. This must have been very well cared for. It's really still very nice and neat. And then I've got this huge bouquet here. And this is made up. If I look at how this is constructed, it's made up from small bundles, all like what I've just been showing you, those small bundles, and then put together into a big bouquet and trimmed with this little bit of twine. I don't know if maybe somebody made this for to hold as a wedding bouquet or something like that. It's very easy to hold in your hand and really neat. And these are those mini iris, all their flowers, and then some other little flowers, just like those little yellow ones that I showed you before. But again, if you look in here, it's all these little bundles that are flossed and put together and then done into a bigger bundle. So I just wanted to show you all these vintage flowers to give you an idea of different ways to make these little like nosegays or little bundles of flowers, and how you can take them and put them into something, you know, these little flowers, you can make a very large bouquet. So at this point, you need to decide to some extent, what are you going to do with your little violets? How are you going to display them? So for me, I intend to put them in that egg-shaped vase that's painted with violets, and it has a wide opening, you know, something like that. And so I want lots of very small bundles because I want to be able to scatter them around. And one of the nice things about having such small little flowers is that they don't weigh very much. And so you can just use regular floral foam and it will hold these small bundles in the foam, and it'll be fine if you don't manipulate it too much and break down the foam. So right now, take a pause and think about, how do I want to display my flowers? Do I want to use some some thicker wire, fabric coated wire, and make a bundle around that wire? Or do I just want to put a few flowers together and use that twisted base to like hold it into some floral foam or that type of thing? Okay, so what we're going to have to do first is we're going to have to sort of get an idea of how long we want our stems to be, bead those stems, and then start putting them together. So let's start with just some little flowers that I made with leftover beads, and I'm going to put them on a fabric covered heavy gauge wire. So this is probably 18 gauge. So it doesn't have much flex in it, and it's nice fabric covered wire. I bought this probably 12 years ago from Parawire. And I think they still do fabric covered wire, but you can't order it from the craft supply. You have to get it from the industrial. But I haven't tried to do that in a while, and I'm starting to run low, so I might need another decade's worth. So if you don't have fabric coated wire, then you're going to want to take your wire and wrap it in floral tape so that things don't slide around and you don't get too frustrated. So what kind of wire do you want to use to attach your flowers and leaves and stuff to the central heavy core wire? It really depends. When I was using the green wire to essentially in place of floss, I would want to use a heavier gauge wire. If I want a really thin stem for some reason, like maybe I'm doing this with petals instead of actual flowers, then I would want a much thinner wire. This, I think, is a 28 gauge wire, but it's unlabeled, and I bought it all, a huge amount of wire secondhand, so it's 28. It doesn't feel like 30. Sometimes when I have two wires at the base, I might use one of those wires to actually start, and wrap, but that's never going to be as thin if you're using a thicker gauge wire. So what do I mean by that? This one has 2 wires. I put the flower where I want it to be, and then I literally take the second wire and start wrapping. Just like that. And that gets it on there, and it's pretty tight, and it's an efficient way of doing it just with the wire you still have. So if I keep doing that, you can trim it whenever you want to trim it, or how long you want to wrap it. We can put all of our flowers up at the top and leaves up at the top. That's one way of doing it. We saw on some of those vintage ones where they had them going down the stem, and that's all dependent on what you want to do and what your preference is. And so this tail wire from that first flower was really long, so I can just keep wrapping it even though I've added that second flower. Now I'm going back upwards. And I'm going to finish this up at the top. Okay. So they're attached. I can take this green leaf and do the exact same thing. I could do the same thing with its tail wire to attach it. I'm sorry. I could do it with the tail wire or the cut wire to attach it. I could also use a fine gauge wire. And when I use a fine gauge wire, let me just turn this over on the other end. If I use a fine gauge wire, I tend to put it down. I have it parallel. I start with a parallel, and then at some point I just start wrapping and do nice tight wraps to get it going, so it's not going to slide and not going to move. Then I put my leaf in, and then, or flower or whatever it is, and then keep, I get it in position and keep wrapping it. And this is going to be difficult for me to wrap because I've got flowers on both ends just for demonstration purposes. So you can do it by rotating or moving the wire around. I tend to hold the wire in my dominant hand and wrap with the wire, so I get it where I want it to go most tightly. This is not the method that I want to use because I want to put my violets in this vase. Okay. And I'm just using floral foam that I got in there, and the pieces I cut from the square block I shoved around the sides. And because these flowers are, if you don't make the bundles very big, they don't weigh that much, and the floral foam can totally support their weight, and it works really well for these little tiny flowers. I've got the flowers and leaves that we've already made. And I need to think about how long do I want to make the stems? How many do I want to put together? I have another leaf, but I'd have to get it off the wire I just attached it to. So I would think putting like all of these and 2 leaves together would make a nice little bundle for a little vase or something like that. Because of what I want to do, I want to have a smaller bundles, little groups of flowers, because I want to spread them out in the mouth of this vase. So instead of having a collection of 7 to 10 little items, I'm going to have just 3, 4, 5. And so I think I'm going to do just a flower, a bud, and a leaf, and make more smaller bundles than fewer larger bundles. So this leaf already has a pretty long stem, right? So I need to start thinking about, well, how long, if my leaf is that long, how long do I want my flower to be? So I'm just trying to put these together and think about, okay, well, if my flower's that long, I think that would be pretty nice. Reasonable. And then I could have a short bud, or really sometimes it's nice to have a tall bud. So maybe a little shorter than the flower. So if that's my, I'm just sort of trying to lay it out to see how long I want to make the stems. And when I get it where I like it, I'm just going to bend the wires a little bit so I have an idea of where I want to get the stems to. And if I get frustrated getting the beads on the wire, I might make a shorter stem, or if it goes on easy, I might make a longer stem, and it all ends up working out pretty well. So now what we want to do is we want to get the beads on the stem, and I'm probably going to end up losing my mark, my fold here. So that was, I said I wanted this flower to be about 4 inches. So I want to get about 4 inches of beads on there. So my preferred, when I'm putting beads on the stem, I prefer to have a long wire and a short wire. And I put the beads on the longer wire so that I have some working distance to slide them onto both wires. If you got to this point and now you can't get the beads through to go through both wires, it's okay. It's going to still be fine. What you're going to do is make sure that you have it twisted really nice up at the top and tight, and cut one of the wires. It'll be fine. It will make your stem a lot more flexible, but that's the only issue. It makes the stem way more flexible, but it still will look fine. And so if you've gotten to this point and now you can't get the beads to pass through the wire twice, it is okay. You're just going to have a little bit more floppy flower. It's totally fine. It looks just as nice. So I got quite a bit of beads in that spin, and that's for me it's harder to work. That's probably close to 2 inches. So I try and get around an inch, inch and a half. And then when I have the shorter wire, it makes it easier for me to slide in there. And these beads do pretty well, but they're right at the limit of being able to go through this twice. So it takes some, some of them just do not want to go. This is going okay. If the wire twists, you have to start over. You got to take back the beads up and get the wires to be really unkinked and parallel. And you can see, like I can feel which beads are really tight and which ones are not as tight. Okay, so there, try not to lose those off the end. So once I get them on, usually they slide pretty well, but sometimes you get beads that are super tight, and often they'll break, so that does happen. The beads, if when you're pushing the limits, getting 2 wires through them, sometimes the beads will just crack in half. Okay, so I got fairly frustrated beating this stem on camera, and then as soon as I stopped the video, it went a lot better for some reason. So anyway, I managed to get the stem on and both wires through. And then for the very last bead, you want it just on one wire. Pull it up, make your stem nice and tight. You don't want any bare wire showing. And give that a couple of twists below that last bead. So it's going to look like that. I don't know if that'll stay in focus or not. Just a few twists off the bottom. Oh, that's better. A few twists off the bottom. So now we've got our leaf and our flower, and I need to do this bud, and I will again try and do this on camera. We'll see how it goes. I'm trimming the ends just to make sure they're nice and smooth. And this looks like I want about 2.5 inches of beads on this. About 2.5 inches. If your beads are giving you trouble, you know, using a smaller amount is less frustrating, I find, personal preference. But that first one slid right on. Oh, there we go. Slid right on. Second chime's the charm. Okay. Again, if these wires twist, see how they were twisted? When they hit that twist, the beads won't go. So you just want to make sure they can untwist or move. And then you want to get them up and tight to the to the base, as tight as you can, so that you're not seeing a lot of bare wire. And we just want to do that till we get about 2 inches worth of beads, 2.5 inches worth of beads on this. Okay, so this bud went to, the stem went on this bud much easier than the little flower. So sort of luck of the draw, luck of the spinner maybe. And then I'm just gonna use that last bead to keep these beads from falling off the stem, even though they're on there tight enough that they're probably not gonna fall off. I always do a bunch of twists down on the end, because if I am going to wire, if I'm going to attach these to a fabric covered wire, I find that the wire I'm using to lash it on grips really well in the twist, so it keeps things from sliding around. So out of habit, I always do that. In this case, we're just going to twist these 3 pieces together. So if you were doing a lot of these, I might twist 2 or 3 or 4 together of these little ones, and then another, do the same thing, and then take some fine gauge wire like I was using before and lash those little twisted bundles together. In this case, because of the vase I want to use, I'm just going to twist these together. Start putting them, put those bases together. And you're not going to see the very bottom, because I'm going to end up putting this into floral foam, and then I'm going to cover the floral foam with some Spanish moss that I bought. You can get it at craft stores or Amazon. And so I'm just literally twisting those together, and I'm going to add my third one on. I could have, because I'm only doing 3, I could have actually done these all at once. And you just always want to twist in the same direction. And if that's a habit you can establish early in your practice with French beaded flowers, always go the same direction so that you know when you're twisting and when you're untwisting if you want to disassemble something. Okay. And then now I've got my little bundle. I'm going to just cut off the end. And this is because these 2 have 2 wires. Well, all 3 of them have, or the stem is with 2 wires. They're going to stay pretty well. And then if I take my vase, I think I'm zoomed in. So if I take this vase and put this in and push down there, it's going to stay really pretty well. Can't get the angle very well, but so this is small and the flowers are light enough that it's not going to bother the foam at all. And when I put a bunch more bundles in there, I can then start to be like, well, I want this bud facing forward, or this flower I want to turn it off to the side, and I can really shape it and get it to look sort of like the front of the front painting on this vintage vase. So so there is our first bundle of violets. Okay, And we can just keep going and make a whole bunch more and try and fill the whole vase. So I have 4 more pieces ready, and originally I was like, oh, well, I'll just put them all into one little bundle. And then I was realizing, based on the vase that I'm using and stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna make it into two bundles. So I got the stems beaded, I twisted the ends down, and then I'm just gonna twist the ones the one, two of them together, and just like that. And because I'm gonna put so many of these little bundles into the same vase, I am not particularly worried about the lengths and the shapes, and I'll keep sort of shaping them and moving them around once I put them into the vase. So let me twist these two together as well. And you can see I've got different lengths, and then I'm just going to trim off the ends. Oop. Ooh, that went flying. Oopsie. All right. And I've got these. I could be putting these into the vase individually, but I've always done it in small bundles, and so that's the plan. It has slightly fewer holes for the into the floral foam and that kind of thing. Maybe we'll put this one right up front. And then we can start. I know you're looking at this from above, but I'm sort of like, oh, how am I gonna turn that bud off to the side and sort of start to arrange it. But I really don't need to do this until I have all the flowers in there. And it's actually because the floral foam is fragile. It's actually better if I don't mess with it until I have them all in, and instead of doing it over and over, which is my nature. I like to sort of futz with it and that kind of thing. But this is coming along, and these flowers are all made from the same shiny purple beads, but I will, what am I doing there? These same purple beads, metallic purple beads. So I will then use some different shades of purple, different finishes of purple in there. And maybe because there's some white in this painting, maybe I'll throw one white violet in too, but maybe we'll see. We'll see how that looks. Definitely some more leaves, and then top it with some floral, some moss of some type, and it'll look really good. Thanks for following along.